This guy begins with a disservice, unable to discharge his duties as a representative, having to deal with all of these legal problems. They are playing for time. Kevin McCarthy cannot afford to lose a Republican vote in his quest for Speaker on January 3rd. I believe that despite the very serious legal and political problems that Mr. Santos has, they're going to do everything they can to get through the next 2 years.
That was former Democratic Congressman Steve Israel. He once held the seat to which George Santos was elected in November, explaining why the House GOP seems willing to tolerate what has become an endless stream of embarrassing lies and complete fabrications by Republican Congressman-elect George Santos. But even if House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy is willing to give him a pass for the sake of getting his vote of being elected Speaker, back home in New York, Santos is now under intense scrutiny. From the state AG, Tish James, from a Republican DA on Long Island, and now from federal prosecutors interested in the money trail. A source telling NBC News that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn is now investigating his financial disclosures with many, many questions and few answers from Santos about loans Santos made to his own campaign. NBC News has reached out to the House GOP leadership but has yet to receive a response. George Santos has also not responded to requests for comment, but he has apologized for lying in a recent interview. Joining us now, Washington Post national correspondent Philip Bump, and Barbara McQuade is still with us. Philip Bump, take me inside and sort of as a bookend to our last conversations about Republicans and their tolerance for just about anything. Enter Mr. Santos, who's lied about everything. I think today's revelations are about lying about where he went to school.
Right. Yeah, no, I think you're right. Earlier this year, I would have said that Herschel Walker was probably the best test of the strength of partisanship in people running for office. And I think it really was a strong test of that. But I think the Santos test is really one about how the party responds to partisanship and this push to maintain its partisan advantage. And so, yes, there's been this whole gamut. I mean, honestly, we could spend the entire hour just talking about the various things that Santos has claimed that have turned out not to be true. But really, the test here is, does the Republican Party establishment itself see Santos as so toxic that they have to take some extraordinary steps to prevent him from being a member of their caucus for the next 2 years, or are they simply going to choose not to? I think Steve Israel is right that they're probably going to try not to do that, given the narrowness of their margin here. But I think it becomes incredibly difficult as these things continue to pile up, and it just exposes that this party, the same party that was reticent to do anything in response to Marjorie Taylor Greene, that was reticent to do anything in response to various other actors who've made various claims like Paul Gosar from Arizona, what's the stand they're going to take now with Santos? What makes him different in a lot of ways than these other folks? And I think we're really going to see partisanship again shine through.
Barbara McQuade, I want to share what we know to be under scrutiny or examination. They're mostly around some of his filings and his finances. It's the campaign finance forms for his 2020 campaign, a campaign he lost. He lists no assets and a $55,000 salary. By 2022, he lists a salary of $3.5 million to $11.5 million in salary. That's a big boost in 2 years. And then he loans his campaign more than $700,000. Dan Goldman on this network said earlier, either he let donors give his company the money and then transferred it to far exceed campaign finance limits, or his company really made all that money and it illegally funded his own campaign. What do you think investigators are looking at?
Well, I think, Nicole, they're going to want to look at the source of those funds. Was it, as Dan has suggested, sort of a straw donation that was funneled through a corporation or himself? Or is there some more nefarious explanation for where this money's coming from? How did he suddenly come into $700,000 that he was able to lend to his campaign? One of the things that prosecutors are always interested in is whether there is foreign money coming into an election, because that can buy influence that can be used in against the best interest of our country. I also think just looking into pure wire fraud is a possibility here. In addition to the campaign finance laws, when you use a lie to solicit money from others, that can be a basis for wire fraud. And so to the extent his lies on his website attracted voters to his cause and financial supporters who made donations to his campaign, that could be a basis for wire fraud as well.
I think that's what was described as the big grift in the January 6th public hearings. Philip Bump, I guess my question as as people covering this, focus on this investigation, back to the politics, does it matter politically?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the House Republican caucus is covered by the fact that they can't actually prevent him from taking a seat. The Powell versus McCormick decision in the 1960s established the House can't prevent him from being seated. So they know he's going to be seated. The question then becomes, will the House Ethics Committee or will another House entity vote to oust him from Congress? That seems unlikely with the Republican majority, right? I think that right now, the Republicans are in a very difficult position in that they have no idea what else he lied about. Like, for example, Kevin McCarthy's not going to come out tomorrow and say, oh, no, I have full confidence that George Santos got this money legally, right? He'd be a fool to say that based on all the other things he said that have been proven to be untrue. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen once he's seated. But because we know he will be seated and because the bar is high enough that it's difficult to remove him from office and it's going to be contingent upon members of the home party have a razor-thin majority in the House to actually make that decision, it seems very likely that we're going to see Representative Santos in office at least for months or years.